Welcome to the Glue Pod.
Hosted by Aaron Glukov.
Can we check in?
You kidding me right now? Get on your phone.
Featuring musicians, hucksters, and some of the shit.
Community of what's going on. You asking me? Let's start the show. Can we do this?
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Glue Pod. Happy to have my guy Brian Potts, Dr. Brian Potts, in the house.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me here. This is going to be fun, dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for doing it. I like your setup back there. You got the vibraphone. And
Yeah. I've had that vibraphone pretty much behind me since I think freshman year of college. My teacher there, Nay, like they were selling gear from the marching band to get like all new Yamaha gear. And he sold this thing to me for like $1,000, which was all my money at the time. Like I had saved up, all of my birthdays and Christmases and everything for that. So then he's saying, it's $1,000. You'll never find a better deal than this. That's all my money. Like I can't get, what am I going to do? He convinced me. He was like, this is the best deal you ever get. I bought it and it's been like behind me in some form or fashion. Like I remember I had it in the closet in the freshman dorms. Like I've taken this thing everywhere, but it's just so nice to have it up and like ready to play whenever, it's like having a piano in the house or something like that. Just walk by and instant noise. It's the best.
do you play like vibraphone off like every day? Is that like your main shed for you?
It's not like a main shed, but I play it all the time, man. Because that's what I did during my undergrad degrees and even into like my graduate degrees was mostly focused on classical percussion and a lot of mallet, a lot of like solo mallet playing, solo marimba rep, solo vibraphone rep, and all that sort of stuff. And then I continued playing. I still play vibes with Sammy Figueroa, and he has a Cal Jader like Latin jazz kind of cover project that I play with. That's super fun.
I haven't seen that. I got to come check that out, man.
Sally's Tomato. We haven't done that one in a bit, but like I've played with that group for, 10 plus years now, something like that, maybe more.
Oh, that's awesome, dude. Yeah, I always like, because you've been so like inundated in the funk scene and the like the jazz vibe in Miami that I don't forget, but I know you came from a classical background, but it's you've definitely.
I took a left turn somewhere back there,
Yeah.
like because my training was 100% in that and doing orchestral gigs and wind ensemble and all of that kind of stuff, and I learned a ton from that method of thinking, a ton from going to school for all those years, but when I got out, I kind of made a decision that I wanted to focus on this other world that you see me more working in now, playing with funk groups, playing with jazz groups, playing from a setup of like congas and toys, kind of like the standard American pop setup. That and all the Brazilian stuff was just stuff that called me a little bit more. And I sunk more and more of my time into it, But I think everybody goes through like these phases in your life where you're like, all right, I'm into this now. Maybe it's so different.
But so when you started out, how did you get into classical music, and what was your inspiration to do it? 'Cause I know we've talked a little. I know you were in Texas for a long time. That's where you grew up.
Born and raised.
And so obviously there's a huge like marching band culture, a huge just band culture, music in schools kind of. So is that how you delved into it? Was just through the education process, or was there like an actual like concert or something you saw that was like, I want to do that? Or
Well, there were like several things. There was my uncle was a drummer at University of Miami back in the 80s.
Really?
Yeah, James Dorgan. He was music business, and yeah, he played in like the show choir there and a bunch of groups there. And then he moved out to LA, and he's been out there for a long time. He does entertainment law now. But he was like the first guy I saw playing drums, and like he gave me my first drum. I think he gave me a Ludwig snare drum in the syncopation book, like back when I was like in 5th grade or something like that. And
Nice.
I was not super ready or into it. Like I had taken piano lessons. My parents forced piano lessons on me. Like I think is fairly common here in the States. And they were like, all right, you got to do this for a couple of years. And I did it for a few years, and then I just got sick. I got stuck of playing the entertainer over and over again. So like I was out. And then Jimmy sent me that drum and syncopation book, and I started trying to play from it. And then like maybe a year later is when I joined like the percussion class at school, you know. And that was just kind of a track towards marching band from there through the education system. Like we've talked about before, you know, that like marching band DCI like world is where a lot of people touch sticks for the first time, you know?
Yeah.
And that was totally the same for me, you know, like that was the thing that gave me the opportunity to play, because I already played piano. Like all of the mallet instruments came super natural because it was just like, oh, this is a large piano. I understand this conceptually already. So like, yeah, by like my second year, I was playing like those George Hamilton green xylophone rags and just like all this varied stuff, man. You know, there was a lot of different things that I was doing within the percussion world there, but it was all centered around that educational world until my Spanish teacher in 10th grade, I think it was, she came up to me like after class one day and she goes, "You're a drummer, right?" And she gave me a CD, and it was this group Cubanismo. And they were a Cuban big band that was coming through Dallas. They were playing over at SMU, I think. She goes, "You're going to love this. You should check out the CD, go see the show." And like before I saw the show, everything else I did was in that educational setting. I was like in the orchestra and like the percussion in the back of the orchestra. Like, you know, on the field is a different thing as a drummer. You get sent to the back a bunch. And I go to this show for the first time and I see like the percussionists all up front, you know, and then there's a band behind them. And it was like this big, like Cuban big band thing with a full, like, you know, timbales, congas, bongo, up in the front, singing, playing, people up and dancing. And like, I did not experience that in marching band in high school. You know, it was a very different musical experience. And so when I saw that for the first time, that was the thing that like set me off into that world of hand percussion and things basically just outside of marching band, which was the world that I knew at the time. And that sent me to want to go to Miami, and that got me like.
But
moving out of
were you
Texas.
passionate at any point about classical music, like the repertoire itself? Did you have a desire to play
yeah.
that? I mean,
Totally. When I
right?
was
Because
in,
I was
like,
gonna say, as far as you went with it, you must have had a, you know.
100%. I mean, like when I was in like 6th, 7th grade, and like I didn't even know what other people were listening to at that point. There's like a big hole like in that era of popular music for me, because all I was listening to was like Evelyn Glennie's CDs, like modern contemporary percussion solo performance stuff, you know?
Got you. So
Stuff
that was
that I
your
would-
route into it. It's from
Totally,
that perspective,
because-
like the percussion ensemble vibe.
Percussion ensemble and solo, because like you had to do like, what was it, solo and ensemble you had to do every year. You had to prep a solo for it. I got super into that.
And it's super cool. Like for people who don't know, like, because I only did a couple ensemble things where we did like, you know, what are the competitions or one of the things where they give you a rating or whatever and you put together. It's so cool because that's one of the few times. And we had a similar kind of like coming up, you know, when I was in high school before I really got back into drum set, you know, I started drum set like at 11, but I was like dabbling and I wasn't really into it. Marching band via, you know, the classical percussion experience of middle school and everything was what really was my passion for drumming, was standing up and hitting stuff. It wasn't sitting and doing the whole drum set thing yet. But anyway, my point was just that, you know, you're doing all these solo and ensemble festivals, snare drum solos, and you know, I was a snare drum guy, March DCI, you know, snare and everything. And when you do the ensembles, you finally get an opportunity to interact with other people and like build this section, and it's a team thing, and it sounds so cool when it's put together. Heavy vibe.
Yeah, exactly, man. Playing with other people, communal drumming. You know, that was like a place where you got to do that, which is different than being the drummer in a band or something like that, where it's like, and especially you're all nerdy about percussion together. Like it's a really good, strong community. And I honestly loved it, man. Like, because I went to school for it at UM, and like during high school as well too. Like, you know, the solo rep that I got to do, I really enjoyed. What I hated was getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go to marching band in like friggin' December in Texas. Like it was terrible. I mean, like I did like one full year of that, I think. And then I was like, yo, I can't do this. This is not, I'm signing up for music because I don't want to get up at 6 in the morning, you know, like that's kind of part of this, and you've ruined it for me.
That's amazing.
I want no part of this anymore. So I got out of that, but I kept wanting to like continue on with the classical percussion route. I even joined the orchestra for a year and played bass so that I could still have access to the room where the mallet instruments were and practice. And that's how I prepped for college and shit like that, you know?
Wow.
And then
Bass.
Upright bass, baby. Yeah.
That's not an easy side hustle.
It did not last long for me. I was not meant for that instrument, I guess. But there is nothing better, even better than having a vibraphone at the house is having an upright bass in the corner. Because I had that for a summer, and you just lean on that thing and just pluck through blues. Man, it sounds so much fun. I would love to have another one of those.
Yeah, yeah. You should. I mean, you got the right height for it, man.
I just love an instrument that you can lean on. That
No offense
same thing
to
with
short
cajon,
upright
you sit
players.
on. But anyway, so that I was still super passionate about it, and I auditioned for school with it. And the teacher that I had at University of Miami, this guy Ney Rosario, was he was my first contact with Brazilian music deeply because he showed me so much, and he was just a huge inspiration for that part. But before that, I knew him as the guy who wrote the Rosario Marimba Concerto, which was the number one concerto that everybody played in these competitions that we're talking about,
Yeah.
And so he was famous to me in that world. And I think I had his signature mallets before I came to school and shit like that. I was all geeked about getting to study with this great master Ney Rosario, who's a composer and a mallet player. And I'm thinking this is going to be my career path. I'm going to sell out solo marimba shows all over the world. I don't know. But I had that in my mind that I was going down that mallet path. And I did for so many years, and I learned so much from him in both that world and then the Brazilian stuff, man, because he became the guy who connected me with all of that. It was through him that I started playing in the Brazilian ensemble at school and just getting hip to those different instruments and that sort of stuff. He was hugely, hugely important in both phases of my life that way, I guess.
Are you still in touch with him?
Yeah.
Does he know? He must be amazed by everything you're doing now, man. And we haven't even talked yet about the depth of your thing with the Pandero and Brazilian.
Yeah,
general,
we can work our way through it. To I'm jumping ahead, I guess, a little bit, but
no.
I
It's just
I
I was
talk with him all
curious
the time. I talk with him all the time, man. I'm still tech support for the guy. I feel like I'm the TA that I'm never gonna leave the school, because every once in a while it's how do you do this in iMovie, and how do you cut this together? Because he's doing the same thing we're doing now. He's on Instagram. He's got an account. He's making videos. So I keep in touch with him all the time. I haven't seen him in a little while, but maybe next time I get down to Brazil.
Yeah, is that where he is?
Yeah, he
way.
left. He was here up until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, something like that, and moved back to Brasilia in Brazil, because there's a lot of good things about living in America, and there's a lot of really good things about living in Brazil and being surrounded by that community. I think he just kind of missed that after a while,
That makes
so
sense.
he did a good chunk here, because he went to University of Miami before he taught there as well too. So he was in Miami for a couple of decades, I think.
Wow. That's plenty of time in Miami.
that's what I've done. That's 2 full decades now.
Yeah.
Has been my run here. I got here in 2001
Yeah.
to start
Yeah,
at UM.
And it keeps getting better and better. And part of the thing I've been, talking to guys, I've been, obviously a lot of the people I've interviewed have been mostly local musicians like ourselves, and just kind of bringing that common thread of how crazy everything has just grown and keeps growing, new opportunities, and sort of this ability to create your own niche by just the avenue of having opportunities to play the music you want to play. I mean, it's not easy. And then for you, I mean, being, in the Latin percussion world, Miami's ideal, right? I mean, it's
It's two things. It's that there's these other cultures that you're talking about and referring to, that they're around here, and you can go be a part of these things. And also, I think there's just a general cultural understanding of the place of percussion within Miami, because of the makeup of the city. So even playing with you guys in Lemon City or with Kiff or any of those dudes,
right?
It's there's already kind of an understanding of what percussion can do in that place, and it can be valued. Where maybe if I met you guys and we all lived in Des Moines, Iowa or something like that, that relationship may not be there as strongly. I think part of it is just because there's kind of a historic understanding of what percussion is in this particular part of the U.S.
Yeah. No, I noticed that too, because and there's a sense of with or maybe you feel this way, but or maybe you don't, but no. I mean, like within the context of our bands, like these funk bands, like when you're with us on stage, there's this like, at least for me as a drummer, I have this desire to sort of give you your space and allow you. I'm happy to give you your opportunity.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably maybe the way it is. I feel like maybe other music cultures look at it more as like an auxiliary member, like, which it can be useful too, where it's like not like felt not heard sort of thing. Speaking of a great quote from my middle school band director: "You're supposed to be felt,
Four on the floor, right? Yep, exactly.
But I mean, here it's like, no, we want you to be heard. At the forefront.
There's definitely there's space for me, and also like you and the entire circuit of drummers that I play with down here. I think like people are happy to play together and happy to give up that space, and there's such a lack of ego and like and just this willingness to kind of share the space and share the stage, and excited to play with somebody else rhythmic as well too. I think because you guys a lot of times are the only percussion drums on the gig,
Right.
And so when I show up or somebody else shows up in the percussion slot, it's like, hey, we got another buddy outside of the bass player who's talking to the guitar player too much,
Right.
Like
Right.
we can nerd out about like
Our
the
own-
lugs on your drums and shit like that,
Yeah.
Like it's a different relationship, I guess. So
and
no,
you're
that's
really
always
good
super
at it
fun.
too. I mean, you really know how to play. I mean, I'm kind of wondering too, like, did you start doing any of that stuff before, like when you were in high school and college, everything? Were you already kind of playing with bands and stuff?
Totally. I was doing that from the get go. I did that in high school. I went to school with Annie Clark, who is now known as Saint Vincent, and I played with her several
Isn't
times.
Mark Julian on tour with them right now?
Yeah. she leveled up. She kept going that one. She's incredible, man. But yeah, I mean, I knew her as Annie Clark. We went to school together, played in like the same talent shows and all that sort of stuff. And I played like a handful of gigs with her. And there was like this weird little scene around town of people in high school getting together, playing like Grateful Dead tunes and stuff like that. And like, as like the percussionist, I was like, all right, how am I going to fit into this? And I think that was already taught to me from jazz band. Like there's a drummer, and then like there's some congas over there, and that's what the other drummer does when somebody's behind the kit, And so like there was already that understanding of like, all right, I can bring these drums and kind of complement what the drummer is doing and go from there. And so I did that in high school. In college, I did it all the time, playing in CJB and like all the R&B ensemble, all the different like jazz groups, that was such a huge part of the going to that school for me, was not only the classical education that I received, but like just being around and like getting to be a small part of like what was going on at the jazz school, because that's how I got to meet all of you guys. That's how I got to learn how to fit into these types of groups musically, and what I could do that way. And probably more of what I'm doing now is related to those experiences at UM rather than the solo recitals and stuff that I had to do.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Well, I'm curious, like from the point, I was even trying to remember today when we started overlapping and how that all played in. So, you graduate from UM, you finish all that stuff, and from that point until you really started delving into Pandero and starting these groups or being part of these groups that you're in. And I want to talk about when you actually went down to Brazil and all.
Sure.
Yeah. So like, but I just trying to get the timeline right of like how you segue from, a really high amount. I mean, cause you have a PhD, right?
It's
Or
a
is it a
DMA, Doctorate of Musical Arts, but yeah, it's a terminal degree. Yeah,
It's
Dr.
like the
Potts.
music equivalent or something.
Yeah, for performance. I think you can get a PhD if you do like musicology or music
Right.
education. But for performance degrees, which is all I ever did, that's
It's
a
a
terminal
DMA.
degree. DMA. Yep.
So,
Dr.
I mean,
Potts.
It's a lot of Dr. Potts. I mean, it's a great name anyway. It would have been
really all I
worth
was
doing all
going
that
for.
school despite the education.
That's all it was. I haven't used it for anything else, but to just say that every once in a
Yeah,
while.
it could definitely be like a Marvel comic superhero alter ego.
I don't know if it's a hero or a villain. It does kind of sound more villainous to me.
It does. It has a
Dr.
little
Potts.
edge. But I mean, it's a lot of schools, a lot of time. And I'm just curious. So from that point, did you what was the first thing right out of school?
Well, I mean, it was really a continuation of school. Brazil is more than anything else. I feel like Brazil is kind of like my post grad. degrees, essentially, because it was a continuation of what I was doing at the school already. Because when I entered into school, I was playing all the classical stuff. But that first year, Ney had a Brazilian ensemble there on campus, and they were playing samba and baião and forró and all these different styles from Brazil, because he's from there and he knows all these different things. Whereas, like, if you had a Brazilian ensemble led by somebody who didn't know that much, it would probably be like all bossas and a few sambas, and that's it. But it was this wide variety of all these different things, and I was amazed by like how much different stuff there was to learn in this world. I dove into it super quickly. After my undergrad, which ended in 2005, I went to Brazil for like 2 months, I think, over the summer. I emptied my savings account again, and I didn't know anybody down there really at that point, and I didn't speak any Portuguese. I had one friend in Sao Paulo, Douglas Laura, that I stayed with there, but I was in Rio for 3-4 weeks by myself, and I met so many great people on that trip. That's what made it so amazing, is that I could go down there by myself, but like within like a matter of days, it's like, all right, I met this new person, they showed me their group, and I'm going to these rehearsals and da-da-da, and like off from there. And like that's why I felt so at home so quickly in that place. That marked me, and like ever since then, I couldn't stop thinking about that trip and all the music I saw there, and like it was just like it was something else after all those years of like studying Brazilian music from afar and like downloading shit on Napster and listening to it that way, to like being there and being surrounded by all these people who like not only knew the stuff that I knew, but knew it on a much deeper level and like lived it and experienced it. And to be in that place was really crazy, you know?
And for them to like be accepting of you and allow you to be part of their world.
That was so amazing as well too. Like the openness of everybody down there and their willingness to share the information and not kind of like guard it like this is our culture, not for you sort of thing. Like it was just like, oh, you're interested in this? Well, come, we'll show you everything, you know? Like that's always been my experience down there with everybody. Like I've been 30 plus times and I don't have a ton of bad stories about Brazil.
You've been 30 plus times?
Yeah, it's over that. Once I crossed over 30, I stopped counting, but like it's in that area.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because
man.
I went
Would you
that
ever
first
live
time.
there? Would you ever consider living there?
Yeah, totally. I certainly am considering living there. I have been considering living there for the past 10 years, I guess.
Well, if DeSantis becomes the next president, maybe we'll have a good reason.
If Bolsonaro gets out of office, because otherwise it's just like jumping out of the frying pan into the fire kind of situation,
right,
you know?
Right.
But yeah, man, that place, that 2005 trip just marked me. And then after that, I was like, this is like my thing. This is what like I want to learn more and more about. And like I started making that kind of like my musical identity a little bit. At the end of every recital I did at UM, I would play a pandero solo. And that was like an improvised free moment after like an hour of playing all this like really heavily through composed, memorized music. And it was always my favorite part. And I got super excited about doing that stuff. And I kept going with it. And eventually, so the style of pandero that I play is a more modern take on the instrument that was invented by this guy, Marco Susano. So if you like listen to pandero, like in most pop albums, most pop samba albums nowadays, and especially like back before the 90s, the pandero tuning is very high. It's more of like a soprano kind of instrument that sits on top of the group. And the tuning that I use with you guys is more of that kind of like kick drum, low end, floor tom sort of thing. And that was invented by this guy, Marco Susano, who figured out that if you put a microphone underneath this thing and like attached it to the frame and then detuned it, you use the proximity effect of having that microphone right on it, and it'll like blow up the sound of this bass and make it into this huge, like, it sounds like a samba school by itself, you know? And that was the first thing that I heard of the pandero was that. It was not the traditional use of it. It was that guy playing it on an album called Samba Town. And like the opening track is just pandero. Just like bass, huge amounts of bass. And I was like, what the hell is that? That was the thing that got me obsessed with the pandero.
What year? When did all this happen? Like, when did he invent that?
He invented this back in the late 80s.
Okay.
So it's like, it's a new instrument. And it became popular through his album Olho de Peixe with Lenine. And Lenine is a pop singer from Brazil. And they did this duo album in the 90s where they kind of touching back to that whole like auxiliary percussion thing that we were talking about earlier. In Brazil, there was this kind of movement of like making things very pop, especially in the late 80s and early 90s, with a lot of drum set, a lot of like Latin percussion, and like very minimal Brazilian percussion. And Suzano made this album with Lenini in 92, I think, called Olho de Peixe, where they just took out all of that and there was no drum set, no Latin percussion. It was just roots Brazilian percussion like in the forefront. And the entire album is mostly just like guitar and voice and then an orchestration of overdubbed percussion and all these crazy different sounds. One of them was the pandeiro that we're talking about right now. So this guy Suzano is like, in addition to being like a great player, like he's a really good producer and orchestrator and like percussionist, you know, like and that's why that aspect of it really interested me, you know, like not just the virtuosity of the instrument, but like the idea of thinking of it as like this thing where you have low sounds, medium sounds, and high sounds the same way that you would attribute it to a kick, snare, and hi-hat on a drum set. And you can like orchestrate sounds and orchestrate different grooves on this thing that are outside of the traditional context. And so I started trying to use it like that, like, you know, trying to play backbeat grooves with the guys and that sort of stuff, you know, like.
What year did you start playing pandeiro in general? I mean, when
like right when I got to school.
Okay.
You know, I saw Ney play it that first day. I think I picked it up like trying to play it like a Rick, and he was like, no, that's not. He gave it right back to me, showed me how to play it, and then I was just off to the races. I would walk around school with that thing in my hand, or I'd have a book, or I'd have it inside of a case so I didn't bother people, and I just wander around like.
And at that point, you had already heard this
Suzano.
record. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that was the thing that really turned me onto it, was that record. He played it in class, like as he was introducing what the pandeiro was. This is what he played as a representation of like what it could do. And so right from the get-go, like that's what I was used to hearing, and that's what I thought a pandeiro was that big, massive, you know, fat sound that I try and play with you guys today with, you know. So that guy inspired me, and because of him, I went down there to interview him, and that's what I did my doctoral paper on. So like even though all my stuff was in classical percussion, my terminal like degree and the terminal work that I did, the paper, was on pandeiro, and specifically on this guy, Marco Suzano. And that was like such an education for me because I had all these questions. This was before YouTube was really a thing, you know, and like I could only hear him play most of this sort of stuff. I didn't see a lot of videos. And so like my paper was just me answering all these questions I had about what the hell he did. And
how did you get in touch with him? Was it through Ney or?
It was through Ney. It was through Ney because Ney had a cousin who was playing bass with this guy Javan, who's another Brazilian pop singer. And they were coming through Miami playing the Jackie Gleason. We went to see the show, and then afterwards, like Ney got us up on stage and got us backstage, and Suzano was on that tour as well too. And so I walked up to him like very nervous, and like I tried with some busted Portuguese. It didn't happen. His English was better than my Portuguese, so like we went there. And immediately he was just like, "Man, here's my number, here's my email, here's my address. Like, call me, come down. You can stay with me. We'll hang out. We'll go through everything. This sounds great." And I was like, "Wow, this is amazing. I'm going to write the book on Marco Suzano." So excited for that, man. And I sent him an email, and I didn't hear anything. And I called him, and I didn't hear anything. And like at this point, I had already like started like writing the paper, and I had like the first 30 pages done, you know, and like I was committed to this thing, and I don't have an interview with him. And if I don't have the interview, I have to abandon the whole idea of the paper and just start over.
Oof.
So I just bought a ticket to Rio and went down there and was just hoping that he was in town. And as soon as I got there, I called him and he picked up and he goes, "Oh, Brian, it's you. Come on by." And then it was super nice and amazing again. Like, I think it's just like, you know.
Has any companies like wanted to publish this like get involved behind this interview? I mean like
I think I've got some standard like emails that people get when they write these academic papers from people that want to publish it. And I'm hesitant to publish it in the way it is because it's so academic. You know,
you'd like to revise it, make it a little
I'd
more.
like to revise it and kind of strip it of some of the stuff, like some of the preamble that you have to do to just justify why you're asking the question about it, you know?
Absolutely.
Like, a lot of it is what you have to do to like justify why you're writing a paper about this thing. Why is it so important? All that sort of stuff. And like, I feel like, you know, I could condense that and write that a little bit better and that sort of stuff. So I have some interest in like making that a little more accessible, I guess, in some form or format. But it's up there, man. I mean, like I can share the link with you, and like I share the link with a bunch of people all the time. It's it's in the scholarly repository for Every once in a while, I get an email saying like, oh, somebody in Japan downloaded your paper, like, so it's around, it's out there, and I think it was like the first one on him. There have been others since then in Spanish and in Portuguese and all sorts of stuff, but this was the first one that was done on him, and
That's
and
pretty
he was,
amazing. I mean,
man, I was lucky, dude, to be able to meet him and have the connections that I did and all that sort of stuff. And, it was a really good experience for me just to like see this master, but it was a really important experience for me to see how open and like sharing he was with this music, because that's the thing that really marked me about Brazilian music. That's how I met all my other friends down there, was from him introducing me to other people. Like that, there's something about that circle of musicians that I'm lucky to be around in Brazil, that I learned a lot of really good life lessons from, about just how to be a person and how to be a part of this community. And I see a lot of the same things with our group in Miami as well too, But it's not everywhere. It's not everywhere.
No, and like speaks to like what you were saying earlier about the humble nature of kind of the community down here. I feel like you have to, especially like as a white guy going into these things, you got to have a certain level of humility, a certain level of respect. People got to see your authentic desire to learn the shit the right way, but also humble yourself to the things they tell you. It's funny because you're saying the last podcast I did was Miguel Marino.
Oh,
and
similar story.
He's done this whole thing in Egypt and kind of just put drums. I mean, not that he's not playing drum set at all anymore, but basically kind of put it behind him and has taken on this other instrument. But my point is just, he had to have that moment where he's in Egypt and they're allowing him to come and be like, yo, like, let's exchange, because you can't, there's only so much you can do from a textbook or from far away. I mean, if you really want to do it right, you got to inundate yourself in there.
And I had so many people tell me that. Like, there was this one frame drum instructor, Lane Redmond, who was like really hugely important to frame drum and like the female frame drummer movement. She came through one time and she heard me play Pandero for like 30 seconds. It wasn't even a lesson or anything like that, just like in like a workshop. And she told me, she was like, this is amazing. You just have to go there, Like, you've learned as much as you're going to learn from afar. And you're not going to make another step until you just start going down there and being with the people and living the entire thing. Because that's the most important part about it, is like all of this music is a very communal, like community-based, organized sort of thing. And that when you take part in like a roda de samba, it's not just the music, it's the fact that like for those groups, when you go see a samba, a samba de roda group, or a roda de samba is called, it's always set around a table. So rather than like be on a stage and be performing at the audience, wherever you see these performed, there's a giant table in the center filled with beer and like meat and food and all that sort of stuff. And then the musicians all sit around it. And then the audience is just like encapsulates them. And that's such a different like musical experience, from an audience perspective and from a player's perspective. Because you just feel like you're at home jamming, like just sitting around the table playing with people the way that you would like when you go home for Christmas parties and shit like that, like just musicians hanging out, rather than like we're putting on this show for people. And so it makes everybody else feel like they're a part of it, like they're in this more intimate setting with you. Like it's a different experience. And so like stuff like that, you only learn by being there and going down there,
Well, and it's funny too, because and similar to like Miguel's stories, like I guess I shouldn't be surprised, but I guess there is always this. Like the American perspective of things is like, I feel like, we're accepting of cultures like coming here and everything, but we're not like necessarily like inviting you over to the table if you're coming in to like learn the United States culture or something. And I think, I'm always surprised about how accepting, like when you go travel the world, it's like these cultures are of, I did a Spanish immersion in Guatemala like years and years ago, and just like stayed in someone's home with my father and like studied Spanish like every day. And we're like, whatever. But it's just, coming from the American perspective, it's like you'd think people would be more like, tribal about it, or a little more like closed off. Like we don't necessarily want you here. Or I'm always curious about the actual like geopolitical nature towards Americans, everything like that. But like just like you're saying, and similar to what Miguel said, is like no, people are like very inviting and want you to be, are happy to be like kind of introducing you to their culture and bringing you into it. And it's such an ironic thing, and like I feel like it's an American thing to feel the opposite and feel like competitive, or feel, like we're actually the very tribal ones over here. Like that you want to go to Smalls and see what American music is about, and it's very competitive. It's very like, ego based, and who just like in complete contradiction to what you're talking about, where there's beer at a table, everyone's in a circle. It's like, no, the jam session is there. You are here watching it like this is like a performance, and it's just guys playing tunes, not really that. So,
guys playing tunes is treated differently up here for sure. But I mean, like, I don't know. I feel like there were like Smalls is an extreme example of that, right?
I picked the most extreme. But you know what I'm saying? I feel like, maybe I'm wrong. I just feel
I
like
don't think you are.
I'm
I think
always impressed by, places outside of this country in the sense of like their openness and ability to integrate people into their world. But maybe you feel differently.
I think so much of it is just traveling, man, and leaving this country is such an important experience for you as a human. When did you first leave? What was your first trip outside of the U.S.?
Probably, well, my parents' work it's always been international, so they got to travel a lot, and we'd hitch rides as kids. So pretty early on. And,
oh, wow.
And to your point, it helped shape my perspective of a lot of things, and I lived in like bumpkin towns like Bloomington and Gainesville, where like kids weren't necessarily having those experiences, and you could tell right away we were coming from different places. But yeah, I think the first place, I was lucky was maybe, Italy or something. So my parents had some conference. They were like, let's make this a vacation, and
That's amazing. And about how old are you at this point?
12, probably 12.
Wow, yeah.
11,
That's good. I was a little after. I think I was maybe 14 or 15, and it was a youth orchestra that I was playing with at the time was doing a European tour and going to England and Scotland. And I auditioned for it, and I hadn't been in that group before. And my parents had to like throw down some money for me to go do this, but they did. And that was such a like mind-bending experience for me, because growing up in America is one thing, and growing up in Texas is something else entirely.
Well, I can relate with you on that one. Well, maybe Texas is on its own thing, but Gainesville. Anyway, continue.
How many years of Florida history did you have to take?
I don't know if we took any Florida.
I took 3 years of Texas history. 3 years of Texas history.
That's fucked up.
So like I didn't think I was going to leave. I thought I was going to go to Texas A&M and like wear a military uniform and play in a professional drum line, and like that was going to be my life. I'm never getting out of here, man. And then I went on that trip for the first time, and I saw another perspective for the first time in my life. If I were running for president, the platform I would have would be defunding the military and making it mandatory that everybody, every citizen, every U.S. citizen has to leave the country like once every like 2 or 3 years. Here's $2,000. We're going to send you on a trip. You can go anywhere you want.
It would change the world.
It would totally change the world, man. Because like so many people here, especially in the middle of the country, in Texas and Kansas, and all the way up the middle of the country, they never leave. Right. And so their entire experience is thinking like, this is the best place in the world. This is what we've been told, and I've never seen anything else. So how can I argue otherwise? Really, seems like it really is. And I think there's so much perspective you gain about your own country when you leave and you go see how other people do things. And then you start looking back at, wait, why do we do it this way? Oh, this is weird that we do this. Like, It's strange that we're bringing guns into 7-Eleven. I had no idea, like this seemed normal to me. But getting outside like that made a huge, huge impact on me. I think that's so important for everybody, man.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I feel like this kind of serves to prove my point in the sense of like, you're not going to have people in Texas, if someone comes from another country and they're like, we want to understand how, maybe at a certain kind of like invite you into their home. And I don't know, maybe
that's true. I mean, I could imagine you like you meeting some old Texas bluesman who wants to teach you about like all the roots of the Texas blues and that sort of stuff. I think that exists in pockets.
So maybe it's music is the key. Music or language or art helps people break these divides. And
that's really the thing, is because every time I went down there, I was going and like meeting with other musicians, and we already speak this language together, you know,
There's
like which
context.
is a very different thing than just like traveling down there by yourself as a tourist and being like, I don't, you know.
Right.
Like I had a reason to go down there. I had stuff to talk about with these people. Like we had this exchange that we wanted to have. They were interested in me. I was interested in them. Like that traveling as a musician is the absolute best. I mean, I don't know any other way, but like I can say that I love the way that I get to travel now, because anywhere I go, you can find other musicians, you can find other drummers, and you automatically have an in with people.
100%.
Just by being in this community of people who love to play music, you know?
Yeah. Well, okay, so this is a good segue into the actual, you know, the groups that you're a part of and have formed based off this music, and the, you know, the first one being, I'm going to say this wrong, so I want you to say it. And
PRD Mice.
Yes. And
no, we can do it together, man. You can do it too.
PRD Mice.
Yeah, very good.
What's
very good.
the PRD stand for?
There you go. That's part of the story. That's how we tell the entire story. Because PRD stands for Pandero Hepiki Duo. And pandero is that instrument that I have back there. Hepiki, I don't think I have one around here. It's spelled Repique, like repiki. But in Brazilian Portuguese, especially in Rio de Janeiro, anything that has an R at the beginning of the word becomes an H. So it's Hepiki. So like even when I tell people what the name of the group is, Pandero Hepiki Duo, it does no help because people think it's supposed to be PhD, you know? But it's PRD, Pandero Hepiki Duo. And those guys are Bernardo and Gabriel, Bernardo Aguiar and Gabriel Policarpo. And those are the two people that I met through Susano when I was down there for my dissertation. You know, like he was like, these people are like around your age and doing like an interesting thing. You should go check out this show. And I went to go see them. And I think it was their CD like release show or something like that in 2011 at like a little black box theater in Rio. And I saw this show of just two dudes playing two drums, and that was the entire show. And it was like an hour and a half long, and all this like crazy, like what seemed like through composed stuff with like these melodic breaks, and like just like a really amazing, entertaining show with two drums, you know. And I was just like blown away by what I saw on stage, because I saw in Bernardo, he was from that Marcos Susano lineage, but he was taking it in like a completely new place that like I kept referring to him as like, this guy is like the fucking Tony Williams of Pandero. Like he's just like this young phenom. And like I remember seeing that guy, like video of that guy even before I knew him, when he was like 14 playing in a park, this skinny little kid just like murdering. And so I saw him there live, and I was just like, that's another level of Pandero playing. And I also saw with the Hepiki that now the Hepiki is an interesting instrument because it's part of the samba school. You know, and within the samba school, it's the lead drum. So whenever you hear those like call and response figures in a big samba section, the hepiki is the one playing the solo, everybody else responds. And the hepiki is a drum that's played with one stick and one hand. So you have like not only like different tones with the stick, you know, have like a center tone and a rim shot and edge tone, all these different things. But then on the hand, you have slap tones and open tones and finger tones the same way that you do with like a conga or a hand drum. Right. So you have this kind of really expanded like vocabulary that you can draw from, and the really good players can just make this drum talk, you know? And Gabriel is exactly one of those guys. Like he makes the drum just sing and talk in like one of the most natural ways I'd ever seen. So I saw those two guys play, and I was like, I have to work with these guys somehow. I have to figure out something we can do with them. Like these guys need to come up to the US. My only experience, like really at the time, was still very academic. So I was like, I can bring them up to universities and we can do clinics.
When was this? What year was this?
2011, 12. Okay. It was like right as I was finishing the doctoral degree. And so like I started connecting with them, and I started like going, you know, back and forth. I started working with Bernardo on a Pandero method that took us a long time to finish, but we finally did. Gabrielle, I brought up here to do some clinics. And like we just kind of like developed this relationship with each other where I would just go down twice a year and just like hang out with these dudes and work on shit with these dudes and come up with ideas of how to write this stuff with them and just kind of collaborate. And eventually we had enough kind of material together and enough of a relationship that I said, all right, well, I'm going to apply to PASIC and see if I can get these guys like to come up for that big convention. Then the world's going to be able to see, because again, thinking in this academic mindset, like PASIC is like, that's the showcase, man. Remo is there. Everybody's there. Like the entire world's going to see these guys. They're going to blow up. So I'm going to try and get these guys. We got them to Texas that first year, and it was great. We did like a little run in Texas, played some shows just as like a trio with their duo stuff.
And what's the instrumentation when you guys are together? It's three of you, and you're
So I haven't even gotten to PRD Mice, which is like the larger group that I'm in, because like
Okay.
at first I was just working with the duo, and
it was just, were you playing Pandero with them?
and I played Pandero with them. Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And
Okay.
we would do some shows like that where I would just play Pandero with them and just kind of double them. But I was also like facilitating the workshops and like translating and all that sort of stuff. And so it was this hybrid thing. And we did that PASIC run. And on that PASIC run, we saw Ghost Note. And they were playing for, I think, the first time at that convention. And the setup back then was like they had like 3 or 4 drummers and a couple of percussionists and like one sax player and like one bass player. So, they're a different thing nowadays, but back then it was just like all drums. And after we saw that show, we're down in the bar drinking, and I don't remember who it was, Bernardo or Gabrielle, but one of them was just like, that's exactly what we need to do. We need to just add more drums, And so we applied to come back the next year to basically do what Ghost Note did and play one of those big like showcase concerts, but with like all these other percussionists from Brazil. And we applied. We didn't even know who we were going to ask. We were just like, we'll bring drummers, and the clinic went so well the previous year that we got asked to come back and do that. And that gave us the excuse to set up a recording session for what became the bigger band. Because like then we had like, all right, we have this target. We're going to play this convention in Indianapolis. And then while we're up here, we're going to be able to try and find a place to record. So we started assembling the group, and the group was based around like me, Bernardo, and Gabriel as kind of like the guys who were producing the thing and putting it together. And then 3 other percussionists from Rio, Gustavo Oliveira, Guilherme Oliveira, who are brothers, and they run the Salgueiro Samba School in Rio de Janeiro, like mestres of the Salgueiro Samba, which is like, royalty down there, man. To run a samba school and lead, there's only like, I think like 20 of the big ones in the city, and like that's a coveted spot. So these guys run that samba school. And then Boca Reis, who is from Bahia, which is like a northern part of Brazil, and it's a completely different style of percussion up there, but he lives in Rio playing that style of Bahian percussion. Just a wizard of a timbal player. So these guys are like 3 more freaks of nature that we've added to the group. And we decided that we're going to invite Marco Susano to come, and we're also going to invite Carlos Malta, who is a pife and wind player who used to play with Hermeto Pascoal, and he runs a group, Carlos Malta and Pife Moderno, who came and played a ground up that very first ground up year that we had. They played a couple of shows there. So we invited him too. And we got some support from Contemporânea, the Brazilian percussion company that we work with, and Cooperman as well too, in order to go to Indianapolis and get hotels for the guys. And like, it was wild, man. Cause I was working a regular, university job here and playing gigs at night with you guys, and then spending the rest of my time like trying to produce this little mini tour here. And we found a studio in Philadelphia that our friend Jim Hamilton runs. And he was the former percussionist for Boys to Men back in the day. And like he used, I guess, what money he had from that to like sink it into building this giant studio that was like I think it used to be like an auto repair plant from like the 1900s, this huge, massive brick building that he was converting into a huge studio. And he's like, I've got this like incredible board here and this engineer and all this stuff. Just come and we'll record the thing for free. So we finagled this thing where we're going to go to Indianapolis, play the show, then hop a flight, go over to Philly, live there. And like, we thought we were just going to shoot videos. We brought up a videographer from Brazil, our friend Daniel Lobo, and Mikael, who was helped us on that as well too. 2 cameramen they came up with, and we were just going to shoot videos for this project of all these percussionists, and we didn't even have a name for it. And so like in the preparations for this, that's where we figured out the name, and it would be PRD Mice. And Mice means more. in Portuguese. So it's Pandeiro Repique Duo, but more, as in more percussion and all that sort of stuff, you know? And so we layered this huge group together. We went to Basic, and I'm traveling around Indianapolis, which, as you know, is a very tight, particular city.
Yeah.
And this was right when Trump won as well, too. This was like the weekend after Trump won. So it was a very interesting time in the United States and in Indianapolis in particular. And I'm there with like these like 7 crazy Brazilian dudes, you know, like these percussionists who have never seen a PASIC before. Like they went into that exhibit room and they saw like all the drums everywhere. And they were just like, what the hell? They were having an experience. And then this guy, Malta, who was... Hermeto Pascoal is a legend in Brazilian music, and this guy played with him for years and years and years. And like we learned so much about creativity from this guy. I learned so much about being a pro musician, because this dude, like I told him, all right, we have to leave like at 7:30 in the morning to get in this SUV to go over to the convention center, and like, you know, just dudes in particular, you know, like. You think, all right, they're going to be late at 7:30. That's an early call. You throw on like the Brazilian stereotype of being late to everything. On top of that, you think they're going to be late. No. Malta was there at like 7:15, ready to go, waiting for us with a joint in his hand. And that was exactly the attitude.
You're like, I can
group.
roll with this guy.
I can roll with this guy. I understand this dude. Like, be a professional, like show up on time, like, but do the stuff you love and do it with joy and have a good time and enjoy being a musician, you know? Like, I learned a lot about like life lessons from that dude. He's a wizard of a person as well too. And so they came with us to Philadelphia, and we recorded those videos in Philadelphia in like 3 days. We were like sleeping on like, you know, soundproofing on the floor. Like there was no heat in the building yet. Like it was madness. And we didn't even like have any rehearsals together other than like the show we did in Indianapolis and what we were doing there. And we just put together an album in 3 days, you know, and we didn't even realize we were doing an album at the time. We thought we were just doing videos. We're going to shoot all these different videos. We'll put them up on the internet, and then we can get this group somewhere. And after like looking back at it, we were like, shit, we have a fucking album here. We should try and get this released somewhere. And so the right after that PASIC was the first ground up here in Miami. And Malta from Pifa Moderno was going to be coming to play that along with Bernardo, who's in that group as well too. And so they were going to be there for that trip. And Bernardo already had this in with Michael League from playing the family dinner before, and Malta playing on the family dinner before. And so after Ground Up, we just presented them with this album and said, you know, it's pretty much done. Like, and we like enter into partnership with you guys, and we were so lucky that they were super interested in it and picked it up from there, and then we signed with those guys and have been with them ever since, man. But like we were just like super fortunate to like have that connection and that like timing of like we recorded it and put it together and bam, here it is, and go. And like it all came together like very surreptitiously.
Very serendipitous too.
Yeah,
in the sense
totally.
of you being from Miami and Ground Up choosing to be in Miami permanently.
Of all places,
so
at that band shell that we play at all the time, you know?
Yeah.
It was very weird. It was like worlds just kind of colliding together.
Yeah.
And it felt even more like that when I got to bring PRD Mike up, I think 2 years later, to come play at the Ground Up Festival. That was like so cool to have like both of those worlds in the same room and colliding for a little bit, you know?
So I have a couple questions. One, when you're playing Pandeiro next to these guys who are virtuosos of the instrument or, you know, grew up playing it, how did you always feel, was there any sort of sense of intimidation, or did you feel like you knew enough to fit right in?
No, totally. There's a complete intimidation, you know? But like I just did it so many times that you get over that, you know?
Right.
And they were always so open and welcoming and wanting me to play like right from the very get-go, even before we were working together. When I would go down there, we'd be playing on jam sessions together, or they let me sit in with a group and you know? So like I had years of playing with them in that kind of context. When we got together and like we were going to do an album and all this sort of stuff like that seemed, I guess, more intense version of that. But at the same time, like they had always been so open and welcoming to me, and I knew how to like find my place in the group, you know, and like, and also frankly find the areas that I could do things that help the group, you know, like when I, you know, because in that group I'm playing not only Pandeiro, but I'm also playing what was a xylosynth, now I use a mallet station, but it's like a MIDI controller run through a Prophet, And like that's a whole world of using that mallet stuff that I grew up playing, all that sort of stuff. And frankly, like a lot of the synth world that I learned from like you guys, from Twin and from Jay and all that sort of stuff, and being around that type of music and seeing what those things could do. Putting that sort of stuff together makes me a more valuable member to the group because now I'm doing something that these guys don't do, you know?
Right. And you bring a modern kind of twist to it.
Gives it another sound as well too,
Yeah.
rather than just being like batucada, like drums all the time. You know, we did that very purposely on the album. The first track is just the duo because that's where this came from, and then the second track opens up with just me playing the mallet station. You know, because we wanted to kind of set the climate as like, all right, this is a different group than just a Brazilian drumming group that maybe you've seen before. You know, this is something not traditional.
So what is the plan for the group now? Like, do you guys have tours coming up, or is there? How do you formulate something when people are all in different parts of the world and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was always a struggle before, and obviously now it's gotten even harder. But we've been active. We recorded I mean, it's going to be an album eventually, but what is a film score now? Over the last year during quarantine, Roundup got a bunch of their artists together to choose silent films to make a live score to, you know. And so we recorded to a film called Waxworks. It was like an hour and 20 minutes of just like original music and like no filler, no dialogue, just like go. So that was so much fun to like write something from that perspective, from like a collaboration perspective, from like across the ocean, and sending the shit back and forth. And like, all right, I'm going to arrange this part, you arrange this part, and then we'll get these guys to record, and putting all that together was a very, very different experience than the last one we did. So that'll be coming out soon. And I'm planning to go back down there, maybe the end of November, early December, but soon, to go back down there and start doing some shows, locally down there as things are opening back up. And the thing is, like, we were supposed to go out on the road right before the pandemic hit.
I remember. I remember. You had a big one on the books.
Yeah, exactly. We were going to be like out in Europe for, a couple of weeks. And like, I was super excited about that. So like that kind of stuff, I think will present itself again.
Yeah, I feel like that. And that was with Snarky Puppy or with Bocante?
That was opening for Snarky Puppy.
Yeah. So I'm sure, when those guys get back on it, it's not like...
Yeah,
I'm sure.
And those guys are so amazing because they do such a good job of curating musicians and getting good people together and creating a community around that stuff. I experienced it a little bit when I went to go watch the family dinner. When Bernardo played in it, and then we've seen it at Ground Up as well too. Like they bring together a really good community of diverse artists rather than guys that are just aligned with the sound that they have.
Yeah,
so
it's great.
For their openers can kind of be anybody, and so that was going to be a lot of fun. So hopefully we get to do something like that again soon, and try and book
I hope
this.
that comes back around for you guys, man. That sounds amazing.
I'm sure it will, man. It was, that would have been so much fun that time. But the nice thing about this group is like whenever we go anywhere, whenever we perform, we can also do clinics and teaching opportunities at universities. Because we're a traveling group of like Brazilian percussionists, so like we can do all these samba classes, we do bandera classes, we can do timbal classes, so anywhere we go, we have these opportunities to teach, and I think that's a big important part of the group, and that's a big important part of the thing I'm trying to do here with Miami Bloco now as well too. Like that's another aspect of this Brazilian percussion thing that I think is super powerful. Is not only the like going to see the show and that sort of stuff, but like the inclusive community around it of like bringing other people in to play and learn this music and be a part of this music, because we have Miami Bloco here, but like all over the US and all over the world, there's tons of like local community samba schools and people who are in love with this music from Brazil and are big fans of it. And it's the reason it traveled everywhere is because A, it's great music, and B, because that like community structure of a bloco of people playing drums together is ancient technology. This is like what we've had as humans. This has been a binding force for humans as long as we've had them, is music, right? And the idea of getting like drums together where you don't have to plug anything in, you just like show up, bam, play, and it's like a group of 20 people, 30, 40 people, like that's an energy, that's a feeling, that's a thing, and like that's the thing that I love about going to Brazil, and that's why I encourage other people to go down there. That's where all of these guys that I play with come from. That's a big part of their musical experience is teaching and sharing this sort of stuff. So we're trying to do that here as well too, and open up the bridge between Brazil and Miami by bringing other people, other clinicians to come here and teach at that group, and open up more opportunities for PRD Mice to come up and play and all that sort of stuff. I think there's a real strong connection here between Rio and Miami, not just because of the like tons of Brazilians that we have living here now, but also that group and the ground up thing that we have going on, and the Miami Bloco thing that's really been like growing a lot over the past couple of months is like there's another level to that, because it's getting people from the Miami scene really involved in understanding what that music can be and what that experience can be, man.
I gotta come play some something.
We got to get you out there, man. You're
Yeah.
always welcome, man. You would love it, man, because it feels like drumline again in a sense.
Yeah,
You know, the best sentiments of it. You know,
Yeah.
we don't do push-ups, but like other than that, like it's that's the same idea. You stand in a line with people like on, you know, wearing slings and drums and playing, man.
It's great.
You would friggin' love it, dude. And everybody who's got to see it and be a part of it down here has been like really supportive and super enjoyed it as well too. And I think that's such a powerful thing, getting other people within not only just like our music scene, but people just in the community who have been coming to these classes. It's like it's a really good mix of people who like are in our scene and understand what it is to gig and rehearse and all this sort of stuff, and people who are like approaching performing for, you know, kind of the first time, you know.
It's fascinating, man. I mean, it's crazy to just all the things that fell into place just for that group to become a thing for you, and it's like part of your own personal journey too, because you know, have been to Brazil so many times and like, you know, immersed in the culture and the music, and then now and actually have a group be born out of it. I feel like so many people miss that part. Is like you can't just like, you know, it's one thing to just like become like an expert at a style, but then to like be able to put it into action and like put it into, you know, a group, make a band out of it, because it's another level, because it you know, and not just as an exercise. Like I feel like some people do these kind of things and like it just becomes an exercise. Like the band is like you were saying, like it's like to replicate, but to actually be like, all right, how are we gonna make this an original voice? And it's pretty awesome, man. I have a lot of respect, admiration for what you're doing, man. It's pretty incredible.
Well, thank you, teens, man. I super appreciate that, and it's like the Miami scene and you and everybody that we all get to play with is so incredibly supportive and like and welcoming of that. And like when I come in with like crazy ideas of like I'm gonna play this trash bucket and be a part of your band, people are like open and welcoming and into it, you know, and like that's a very cool thing about this community here, you know, that's really good to be a part of. So you should totally come play with Miami Bloco one of these days. You would dig the shit out of it. And that's a thing that's open for like anybody. If you're listening to this and watching this in the Miami area, come out and come play with drums with us. Like we have different aspects of that group, but we do these open workshops where we're just like meeting up in a park, and like I have a bunch of drums that I got from the PRD Mice tour. So, you know, this all comes from that like journey that I had, and we'll teach you to play with like in an hour. You'll get up and playing, and you'll understand like the communication of the drums a little bit and how things work, man. It's such a fun time. And then my dream is to like get you guys to go down to Brazil.
Yeah,
you know?
hell yeah.
Because how many times have I talked your ear off like I did this previous hour, but like outside of Lagniappe or any of the New Deck or any of the gigs that we did.
It would be amazing. It'd be
about
amazing.
all the things that I love about Brazil and all the experiences that I have. Like that's something that I feel like you guys need to go and experience and see, because it's so amazing to be immersed in a culture like that appreciates live music.
Yeah.
Like,
and I'll
that
never forget
fundamentally.
your story. I don't know if we have time, because I know you got to split your of doing Carnival and right.
Which one?
Is that what they call it? That's what it's called. It's Carnival,
Carnival.
right? With the
Carnival
with the marching,
is like the
all
big
the
celebration.
different.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same. Okay, because I remember you and you actually were invited to march along with one of these.
Yeah.
Can you give us a quick rundown, and then with the shoes being the wrong size? And I know you got to run, but we got to get a little of that before you go.
We can totally do that. So that was right before the pandemic. That was 2020 February, like a couple of weeks before. I went to Carnival with to play with Salguero, and Salguero is the samba school that I mentioned earlier. Guilherme and Gustavo Oliveira that are in PRD Maish, they run that samba school, and I got a call from them in like, I don't know, December or something like that, asking if I would come down and be like a special guest of Salguero and play with them and play cymbals with the group, which is not a traditional like bateria Brazilian percussion instrument at all in that context anyway. And so like it's this weird kind of like thing where it's like normally in order to play with one of these groups, if you're playing Hipiki, Caixa, you got to be at rehearsals for like the like weeks before, the months before, the almost the entire year before. And I haven't been able to do that yet because I'm up here so much. But they invited me to come play cymbals, which is just kind of like more of like a, I do a crash every once in a while, and a little bit of choreography and all that sort of stuff. It was a lot of responsibility because we were like waving our hands up, and if we did them at the wrong time, it would look bad, totally. And like we were at the front of the group and all that sort of stuff, so I was a little stressed about it. But I didn't have to be there for all those rehearsals the same way I would if I were going to do the other ones. So I flew down like the day of Carnival. Like I landed at like 6 a.m, and we were going to be like marching that night at like 1 a.m, And so I landed and I kind of like crashed, and then like I went down to like the samba school in Salguero to like go get my uniform and like meet with the guys and talk through what the parts were going to be and all that sort of stuff. And everybody in Carnival has to wear what's called a fantasia, which is a uniform that you wear so that you match everybody else. And the theme that year that they were doing was on a payaso negro, which was a clown figure. And so the idea for the bateria was that everybody was going to be dressed up like a jester with like painted faces. It was going to be like entire get up. And so you have like 400 people playing drums together in this same outfit. And, they make them there at the samba school. They're all custom made. So I have to show up and like pick mine up, and I get mine and I'm trying everything on, and I open up the shoes, and the shoes are like a size 6 or something like that,
Get the fuck out of here.
And I'm a 12, and it was just like, man, I don't know if this is going to happen. So I start like trying to find somebody to like talk to about this, but like it's the day of Carnival. Like everybody's so busy, nobody wants to hear anything from me, And so like
look at this guy. You can't put him in a size 6.
That was all they had. It was like the last one, and this is the risky run of like showing up the day of and jumping in. And so we get to like, it's much like Drumline, where like there's a big truck that takes all the drums down, and then you're getting the parking lot outside, and you get the drums out, and you get dressed up in your gear. That's what was happening.
Yeah.
But painted the face, the whole thing. And I get down to the shoes, and I start trying to put the shoes on, and it's like, dude, there's no way. Like my toes are like making a fist, like it was.
Sounds horrible.
It was bad. And I run over to Guilherme. I was like, do you have a knife or something? Like maybe I can cut out the back so my heel sticks out. Because the problem is that like you get judged for Carnival. Like it's a competition, and not only musically, but like much like Drumline, that's visual element as well too. So the costumes
how
and
are
everything.
there judges? Where are the judges?
So like the way the samba drummer works is it's a big long stretch of like, I don't know, like a mile and a half or something like that.
Yeah.
It takes like an hour and 20 minutes to walk down the entire thing. It's
so
huge.
it's a sectioned off part of Rio.
It's a
dedicated.
whole building. It's a whole arena with a road in the middle. You
Okay.
know, there's giant like concrete stands on either side. Like imagine a football stadium that just keeps going in either direction. That's what it is. And people like buy
So it's not
tickets
in the
to-
town. You're not marching in the actual town. You're marching in the arena.
Yeah, I mean, like it's in Rio, obviously, but like that's
Right.
that's
Okay.
set aside the entire year for Carnival.
Right.
They have an arena for Carnival, and so like you all show up outside of there.
Sounds a
and
lot
then
like
you march
DCI,
together.
man.
It's super DCI, man. It's super DCI. You would love this, because it's
incredible.
all the exact same thing. So they have judges that are about like what the 50-yard line would be, like
Yeah.
up in booths in the same way, and they sit up there and they judge you like, are you at the right BPM? Have you moved?
Who's that
Like,
guy whose toes are busting out of his shoes?
and that's what I was afraid of, because like I'm going to be at the front line and like I'm this big 6-foot goofy white dude. Like, dude, I look ridiculous already in this clown outfit. Like if I have like my toes coming out, like, and like what if they like lose? Like, because everything is done by decimal points. Like it's such a tight competition. If they lose because of my stupid toes sticking out, like I can't have that. Like, so I find a knife, I cut out the back of the heel, and like my heel is now kind of like sticking out the back, but my toes are still scrunched up. And I'm like, if I have to lose a toe, I have to lose a toe. You know, like
Yeah.
we're just gonna do this. I'm not gonna be the guy who like complains about this or gets like there's no other way. I just have to go. And like there's so much adrenaline at this moment because like when you go around that first corner and like you pull up and you see like 100,000 people, like it just lines straight down that way. Everybody's like screaming, just madness. And you go to this front section called Sector 1, and that's where like the most passionate fans all sit because it's where the bateria like starts and warms up before they march through, you know? So you just start there, and like when that first call comes up, and just this massive sound comes out and everybody erupts. It's orgasmic, dude. Like I didn't feel my toe at that moment, you know? I was like, this is fine.
Did you
whatever,
feel your
man.
ears? Were you wearing plugs?
Oh, no, I was wide open at that one. I mean, we're outdoors.
Yeah.
I probably should have for sure. And there are definitely people that do. But I don't think I had them for that one. It was madness being in that sound, man. And so like I was able to just like forget about my foot and let's go. And then about halfway through like that first march, like I'm feeling it and I'm like in pain. I'm like wincing and trying to keep a smile on my face because we're at the front because we got these ridiculous like cymbals crashing. And we get to this part where like you kind of pull in as a group. And then like the floats and stuff go behind you and then you come back out and you follow them. So it's like a little garage where like the whole car pulls in for a second, you know? And so like as you go in there, that's where you get to rest for a second. And I get inside of there and like we have passed the judges at this point. I'm like, thank God. And I just reach in and I rip open my shoes, just like Hulk them. And like my toes are sticking out and like the rest of it was just like the feeling of my feet being able to breathe at that moment and unreleased was just like incredible. And I had like a moment there. Came back to life a little bit and we finished the thing out and like you have to hit the finish line on time. Like they judge not only like the music but the time and you have to hit 120 exactly. If you go over by a second, you get like docked points. If you're under by like 10 seconds, you get docked points.
I love it.
Like as we're getting to the end of this, like I just hear somebody scream out, "Corre!" which means run because apparently like we're behind time and we all have to get across like so like there I am like running with my cymbals and my clown outfit and my toes sticking out of my shoes like
Dude,
across
how do we
the
not
finish
have
line.
a video of this? Jesus.
I mean, you can find it because I was all over TV. People saw me the next day because that stuff's televised. Like everybody's watching that sort of stuff. They have cameras on the front. Like people saw me for sure on a lot of those shows. And like you can go
digging.
you can go do some digging, man. Salguero 2020. You just look for the big tall white guy. The face painting helped, I guess, a little bit, but man, it was an experience like nothing else, dude. And like that kind of like, that's what samba is about. That, you know, like that's why people are so crazy about it, you know, because there's all those things in place that you understand a little bit from the DCI world and all that sort of stuff. Like all the other things that go around the music make such a big difference.
There's something
you know?
about when you put that many people together in synchrony.
Yeah.
And sound and rhythm and costume. Like when there's that many people coordinated, it's something else. It's a different experience like any other. I mean, it just is. I mean, it just, and you know.
Can't replace it. Can't replace it at all, man.
You know, I can't. That sounds incredible, man. I have so many visuals of that moment. I'm getting new ones now because when you were first telling me the story on a break at a new Deco gig, I was imagining you actually like in the street, like marching through the city with your toes out, bleeding.
Oh, no. This is in a stadium with the lights on, man. Like
it's incredible.
With the whole world watching. It was crazy, man. That was an experience. So I mean, you can sign up and go and do those things as if you follow into the music enough. And I was lucky enough to have that experience. Not many people get, you know, to be like at the front line with like the messages of the bateria and all that sort of stuff was just absolutely surreal. And that's the stuff that's so valuable to me. That's the payoff for doing all of this music stuff is those types of experiences that like, if I tried to tell like, you know, 10-year-old me about it, I wouldn't even have a concept of what this could mean, you know, like
that's amazing.
That's the stuff I really treasure.
Well, dude, I really appreciate you doing this and, tell everybody where they can find you, you know, all your social stuff. My
pleasure, man. So, Miami Bloco is a good one to start with. It's Miami B Loco, really. Miami BLOCO, right? And there you can find all the Miami Bloco stuff and the workshops and come participate. I'm on Instagram. You can search for Brian Potts, or if you're brave, you can type in Ubirajara Potts, which is the name that was given to me by my friends down there. The short version of that is Bira, which is close to Brian, right? So my IG is Ubira Jarapat, and then PRD Maish is another good one to follow as well too. PRDMAIS.
And the records are on Spotify, Apple Music, all the
Records on Spotify. Rittenhouse is the album that's on Spotify everywhere, and get your copies from ground up. And then the Waxworks is going to be coming out, I think, in another month here or so, and then that'll get on Spotify as well too eventually.
It's amazing.
Beautiful, dude. Well,
man.
thank you so much, man. This was awesome, dude.
Absolutely.
Pleasure getting to talk with you.
And
man.
I think we're gonna have to do a follow up because I got more questions now.
I'm down.
It's such a big world to. There's so much to just.
I'm down. Anytime, man.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
You just wind me up and I will talk about Brazil for hours and hours. No problem.
Love it. Peace, brother.
All right. Take care,
Much
man.
love.
See ya.